He was stop there with you. There is one there available. Can one more picture? One more star is available. Yes. Okay, so I think again. Thanks for coming. I will just inform you that we are also streaming online, if it's possible. I think we are full, unfortunately. We can check. Very sorry. We are full. I'm very sorry. Nemá třeba někdo ještě dělej může? O, ten to může. Really, let's begin. We are streaming online. If it's possible for you, we'll appreciate if you can put your mobile phone to the flight mode, because the streaming is very disturbed by the amount of the data we are processing in the room. So if that would be fine with you, we'll very appreciate and it will make our streaming very fun. And now, let's give the floor to Teresa Shilova, the Czech journalist, who will moderate this panel about media and AI and disinformation. I think the topic was very fruitful. Please, Teresa.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome to this panel. And it's called The Intersection of Disinformation and AI, Challenges and Opportunities for Journalists. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome our guests. I will start with the lady. It's Ms. Renata Nikolai, Deputy Director General for Communications, Network, Content and Technology at the European Commission. I will continue with from my far side, whatever is from your point of view. It's Mr. Tomáš Kričák, information security expert, Dělá technologies from Slovakia. Unfortunately, we have Mr. Michal Vašečka, Slovak sociologist, and he's the program director at Bratislava Policy Institute and a sociologist by background. And we have Mr. Jakub Štimko also, he's an expert researcher in Slovakia. Welcome. Here from Patrick Böhler, who is the head of digital strategy at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, based in Prague. Okay. We've got this strategy Pavel, data analyst and founder of Seven Visions. I would like to give floor to Madame Nikolai, and maybe we could discuss the really up-to-date issue, which is the European legislation that has been passed in the European Parliament today. But you already corrected me; it's not legislation. So would you be so kind and tell us what is the today's what happens today in Strasbourg?
Yeah, it's a very good occasion to shed light on our complex interinstitutional lawmaking process in Brussels. So what has happened is that in the Commission we have, as promised also by the Commission President right from the beginning from her mandate, and as already prepared very well in the previous kind of years in a very interdisciplinary way through a high-level group to look at the issue of artificial intelligence, to come with principles which were the preparation for what should come next. So President von der Leyen, when she took office as Commission President, has announced that we would come with legislation, which we then did. So the Commission proposed the AI Act, and since then it has been in the interinstitutional process. The Council and the Parliament have started looking into it. The Council, under the leadership of the Czech presidency, then was relatively fast, and in December last year adopted their position to the AI Act, and it was very similar actually to what we had proposed, and I come to what we have proposed in a minute. And today, what happened in Strasbourg was that we just heard about the vote, a very strong support vote for the position of the Parliament now on the AI Act. And this was a little bit more complex because what has happened in between, whereas when we started working on the AI Act, it was AI is complex and we will start talking about it, but it was a relatively calm debate. But then ChatGPT arrived, and all of a sudden, there wasn't only the rapporteurs and the shadow rapporteurs in the parliament who all of a sudden were busy on the AI front. All of a sudden, you had the feeling the parliament was full of AI experts. And the lobbying was fast and difficult. And that's why it's such an important step today that we have now finally a position from the parliament. And what will now have to happen, we have to bring the positions together. So actually tonight, there will be already the first trilogue. This is then bringing the three parts together to start working through this. It will not be successful. It will be the beginning. But I'm hopeful that in the incoming Spanish presidency, before the end of the year, we are likely, despite elections happening in Spain in July, we are likely to see the real birth of the AI Act, which will be a first ever piece of legislation to try to regulate AI. But what is important, maybe from the outset, to start a debate, to underline, is that this is really a principle-based, future-proof and innovation-friendly approach to AI. It's risk-based, so it's not the idea to have a prevention policy. The idea is to have an enabling policy whereby we clearly say what we want is trustworthy AI. So we have a very limited list of things where we say, this is not for us. Social scoring, we don't want it in Europe. This is a system that we do not want. And then it's a risk-based approach in areas where we see potentially high risk. And one of the contentious issues was, of course, what to do with biometric kind of, supervision. And this is also has been debated heavily in the parliament. So how this is high risk. And in the high risk areas, there will be an ex ante kind of, supervision to look at, has this been thought through? And for the rest, it's really more to invite the actors to be transparent, to come also up with sectoral best examples so that we support this innovation and also the trust in this innovation. Because we know AI is already happening today. AI has a lot of promises in key industrial sectors, and AI is already guiding our digital debate. It was part of what we discussed in the Code of Practice Against Disinformation in the Digital Services Act. It's not that we are inventing it only now. On ChatGPT or on generative AI, we had not discussed that at all in our AI Act. Then the Council has already said this is an emerging topic. We invite the Commission to study it deeper and to come with proposals later on. The Parliament has now moved further. They had to react because it's simply out in the air. And what they have done now, adding more transparency rules on these systems, giving more upstream and downstream information and due diligence, but also not prohibiting it. So this is a little bit where we are in the process, and so the debate is quite timely today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The issue is obviously very complex. So I would like to ask all of our panelists to answer one very simple question, but a simply good question. Is AI more a threat or more an opportunity? opportunity. I would like to ask all of you, maybe Mr. Krish, I would like to start. Thank you very much.
Well, I would say I have no idea because at this very moment we are basically at the start of the technological concept of AI as we know it, and there is more unknowns than anything we know about the technology itself. So. Uh, Making a conclusion that AI will be a danger and will lead to, I don't know, some bad dystopia of humanity would be just pure fantasy if I would be making these claims. But right now we see that I think humanity has somehow learned a lesson from previous years when we had like very difficult time having legislation and regulation for, let's say, technology like digital platforms, which are still showing that they are quite problematic and they have endangered democratic processes, they have endangered a lot of human lives and safety. And with AI, we now see only what I would say very innocent and practical ways how to use AI to help us do otherwise very mundane tasks and help us with very limited amount of work that can be done. But who knows, like what holds the future, what will be possible in 5, 10, 100 years. So that's something that I don't think anyone can account for during this time. And it's even funny that when I was doing preparation for this talk, I even did use ChatGPT, for instance, to have like good bullet points for this debate. And anything I do for the past 6 months is literally done with the help of ChatGPT. So I think to some degree I can already sense that even my cognitive abilities have been challenged by this technology, and I'm not. I don't know like how many of you in the room are actually using the technology, but I think that every one of us who is using or was using the technology can say that it, to some sense, changed our lives and the very way how we have been thinking about work before. So these fundamental changes are here to stay, and I'm just remaining hopeful that we as humanity have learned our lesson, and it's a good thing that even in such a short notice, there is already legislation coming from EU that will be setting some guidance and principles that will help us regulate the technology. So in my honest opinion, I think there is some reason to have like optimism even in regards of AI. And even though a lot of people who are inventing or working on development of AI are saying there's a 10% chance that AI will be the end of humankind, I still think that that might be just maybe a call to panic, which doesn't really hold on some solid ground. So I would say let's be optimistic for the time being, but also let's be careful and let's think about all the things that happened when we were unable to regulate the previous important technology, digital platforms.
Okay. Mr. Vashisha, maybe could you help us be more specific? What is the threat and what is the opportunity?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I started to smile because just before our discussion started, we tried to influence each other with Tomasz not to speak a lot. You know, we know each other from various conferences, and we both tend to speak a lot. So I will try to restrict myself to a few words. Now. Look, as a sociologist, what you can expect from sociologists? Of course, I will be speaking about threats much more than about opportunities. Firstly, you know, this is not a new phenomenon. All of us, we remember Talos from ancient times, you know, mythical automaton with artificial intelligence that ancient Greeks were dreaming of. Frankenstein. Are, you know, to speak to some of those people who are from the Czech Republic about Čapek, RUR is useless. Simply, we are still closer and closer to something what mankind is dreaming of for centuries, for thousands of years. And the problem is, firstly, that always when so I have my negative feelings about it, not because of technical concerns. I believe in the same as the biggest gorilla from Planet of Apes, who basically, you remember, who was saying mankind creates a very special mixture of geniality and absolute idiotism. So I believe in the genius of mankind. So I don't have these technical concerns, but mankind always was never really prepared for paradigm changes, technical changes, and it always had difficulties to swallow those changes. And problems might be societal changes that are connected to those technological ones. So in this respect, I'm not so much afraid of AI, but rather how mankind, how we people will react on the very existence of AI, just for a beginning.
Madam Nicolai, would you join me with that?
Yeah, I really see it more as an opportunity, clearly, because I really think we have a little bit of a hype moment at the moment on the AI debate, frankly, because for some people it's as if they only discover it now, whereas it has been with us already ever since we started looking at the platform realities and kind of algorithmics, recommender systems are driven by AI solutions. So, I mean, we are dealing with it, we've been dealing with it really for the last decade or even more. I think it's important to be out there and to kind of set the trend. And that's why I'm so happy about what happened in Strasbourg and what I designed as a potential kind of principle-based kind of statement from the EU side. Because I think it's a good example where systemic rivalry that we have in our geopolitical context is playing out in front of our eyes. And I think it's an important theme where to work together with allies is a good kind of way to proceed. But I would underline that if we can also say, look at it, with the glass already half empty perspective. It's all the threats and the difficulties that we will have to face, because of course all technological disruptive elements have societal consequences. But then if we don't address this ourselves, then in a couple of years' time we will only be importing AI solutions from other parts of the world, and that must not be our approach. So I would just add a last kind of element that besides talking about the potential societal concerns that we have to put on the table, we also need to talk about the huge business opportunities, personalized medical kind of solutions, digital twins and industrial kind of solutions, the possibilities that we have even in cultural or tourism, even in journalism with AI solutions should not be underestimated. So definitely glass half full.
Well, Mr. Shinko, are you a fan of AI?
Well, speaking as a computer scientist and an AI researcher, sort of, my list of opportunities is much longer than the list of threats. Now, regarding combating misinformation and disinformation, I totally agree with the notion that we already have AI in our lives for 10 years as part of recommender systems, and these need to be audited and under oversight, and that will require use of AI, definitely, so that's one point. Another would be like machine-generated content detection. This will be essentially arms race with the content generators. On the side of threats, I also see personalized misinformation generation or disinformation generation. That scares me the most, probably. But at the side of opportunities, we can also have a, say, holy grail, like an emerging narrative detector, like a universal detector for detecting emerging disinformative narratives. We are not there yet. This will require a lot of work, but with recent advances, we are sort of approaching that as well. In the meantime, we can still use like partial wins through some, for example, credibility detectors, credibility signaling. We can support fact checkers in their work. We can help fact checks to be more exploited through AI. for example, through rephrasing like the essence of these long segments of texts. And last but not least, the recent advances in machine generated text, ChatGPT, let's say, these represent an opportunity for creation of data sets for training AI. So if we struggled in the past with having only small data sets, annotated data sets, now we can augment them with much larger number of samples using tools like ChatGPT. Of course, this needs to be investigated further, but yeah, this is my list.
Ask for your point of view as a journalist or
So, thank you for the question. My first reaction was, I guess it's a similar question when we asked the rise of digital platforms, social media platforms. So what we asked is the mobile phone good or bad for the world? And it really depends on how we use it. To speak to what we do, we are a public media organization in 23 countries where there's a limited free press, so the free press is relatively distorted, including some EU member states. And our mission is to keep that public debate alive, and in some of these countries it is very hard to operate, including Iran and Afghanistan, and now increasingly Russia, for instance. And there we use tools that use AI to make sure we can monitor, get information, and do reporting. So, for instance, recently the Kyrgyz-Tajik border clashes, or right now, of course, with Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine, we use this to look for local sources of information. And that gives me hope, because this will allow us to keep monitoring even when we can't be on the ground. At the same time, there are immense risks as well in terms of making sure that we don't fall for disinformation. In our reporting, we review our content verification processes, what happened. So overall, it will probably require us to rethink journalism more broadly, how we gather information, and how we publish, how we produce and how we publish information, and how we keep that public debate alive. But overall, I am hopeful that it will somewhat help us also step away from kind of what in many newsrooms is kind of the very content-centric approach. And we're more able to kind of really think about what are the information needs of a certain community and serve them very specifically, kind of to the opposite of what you're saying, that we're being able to be extra relevant and using this technology for it.
So, is it time to wrap up this first part of the panel?
Well, if you don't mind, let me share my views on it. I am by far not as optimistic as some of you. Of course, there are huge opportunities for mankind. It will certainly increase the productivity of our economies. But on the other hand, I'm hesitant to think that it will bring us more happiness as a society. Because we see already the impact of online platforms, the large online platforms, mainly social media, which unfortunately haven't been sufficiently regulated by ESA, which ignores significant challenges like atomization of society, amplification of algorithms, digital addiction, and all that leading to radicalization of the societies. And I see a big threat in the combination of the generative artificial intelligence, which we have only for a couple of months, and there's like a dramatic or explosive development in that. We don't have it for 10 years. And many of the biggest brains in the world, they are really scared of what might happen. Me personally, I see the biggest threat in the combination of generative artificial intelligence with business model of online platforms. Because the online platforms, first of all, they are not regulated enough. And their business model is based on getting as much attention as possible. And the human brain works, of course, it pays more attention to information which is full of emotions, and it pays much more attention to the emotions which are the most intense, like anxiety and like anxiety. So. Because today we will talk a lot about disinformation, I would like to add two more layers, which is the hostile propaganda provided or created, being created by Russia and also China. And we have another layer which we may call psychological operations, psyops, which will get enormous boost by the artificial intelligence in the evil hands of our enemies.
I would like to ask about when we draw from the historic experience, this was already said, the democratic civilization was struggling with the impacts, the misuse of, for example, social media. I want to ask, as like normal person, and that is not an expert, are we ready, better ready for the AI than we were for social media?
I would maybe start again, and I don't think we are. We might be better at, for instance, being ready to start with the process of regulation, but when it comes to common users, like common people who are using the technology on a daily basis, we can tell that people didn't really adapt to digital platforms in a critical way. It more serves them to find maybe some nice and safe place where can they stick to their, for instance, already made up conclusions about very complicated world we live in right now, and it doesn't really help people to navigate themselves through what are the objective information that would help us understand even ourselves and our place in this modern and fast world. So I think the digital platforms in 2023, after such a long period of their existence, are still terrible. Like, they are anti-human in my experience, and what, for instance, we see in Slovakia when we do analysis of the information space, it's terrible. It's killing democracy 24/7. It's making people afraid out of manipulative content that is unhinged, unchecked, without anyone being responsible for removal or at least fact check of that particular content. So that's really like ongoing terrible problem. And if I have to imagine a future where, for instance, the already existing manipulators who are misusing digital platforms will start to be more effective with producing content because they would be allowed to freely use platforms like, let's say, ChatGPT, that's actually, the nightmare is on steroids. So I don't really want that. So I think that we should focus on already existing problems, and that would help us, give us maybe a better perspective on what we need to fix now to avoid the future where these problems would be only larger and larger. But that whole thing doesn't really mean that I'm not also partially optimistic about the technology itself, because I honestly believe that if we had this, I would even say, philosophical or cultural approach to technology, that we would really focus on making it human-centric, which means that it is really focused on helping fix or be here for human needs, but in a sense that would respect the very nature of how humans are, or how humans existed on this planet for tens of thousands of years.
Of course, as long as it's tens of thousands of years. So
yeah.
If I may follow up on Tomáš's remarks, To be more specific on that, to give you an example, here in the Czech Republic we have like roughly around 30 hardliners or hard disinformators or however we call them, and it's a combination of unethical entrepreneurs and Russian, let's say, trolls as humans. And then we have like 10 times more people who are like the soft version of those of that 30 people hardcore, and they are able to influence around 1/3 of the population with all the conspiracy theories, like pulling them out of the real world and sowing untrust to our democratic system. All this is being emphasized and amplified by the algorithms of the online platform because it gets big attention. Unfortunately, EU regulations did nothing. I repeat that, did nothing with that. And now we already see that there are web portals, and this has already started in social media, that our opposing force of the people, the disinformators are starting to use generative artificial intelligence, and they start to flood the information space with artificial generated content, which is hostile against our society, goal of which is to dismantle democracy. And just imagine that now we have like 30 people, hardliners, and these can be turned into 30,000 or 300,000 or 3 million or 30 million. It just depends how many instances you open in the cloud. And the threat is real that the artificial intelligence in hostile hands will take over the information space almost completely, and the political discussion as we know it up to now, like which happens between people, will be done or controlled by the governments and the artificial intelligence. So this is a real threat to democracy, and we should do something.
I will pass the word to Nikolai, and you would like to react to the criticism.
Yes, because I really fundamentally disagree with the description that we are not doing anything and that we are falling short of addressing the kind of issues that have been created by the platform economy. I would really see this differently. Of course, I'm looking at it less from a day-to-day Czech perspective, but very much from a European perspective, and assessing on a very regular basis, how disinformation has evolved in member states. If I remember a couple of years ago, when we would start discussing disinformation in European fora, we were pushed aside by many, including by representatives of this country, saying, leave that space, it's kind of freedom of speech, don't touch this, don't mingle in this. And I think we have all grown out of the naivety of, let's say, the Silicon Valley doing just good things for us. With the COVID, now the Russian war, but then you name it, there are disinformation campaigns because they always go for the weak spots that as we have heard also in earlier debates here today. I think I hardly have seen any European Council now where the leaders of the 27 member states come together, where you do not find in the European Council conclusions the joint attention put on disinformation and the need to fight disinformation. I would also disagree with you, if you allow me, that we are not doing enough on the platforms, because I actually think what we have put in place with the Digital Services Act, and that's what I tried to emphasize this morning in my speech, it will be on us now to show that it has teeth and we are actually having the courage to enforce it properly. But it will. I am convinced of that, especially if you see the combination of the Digital Services Act with the Digital Markets Act. It will disrupt the business models of, the platforms as they are today. because to start with, the Digital Markets Act will not allow certain platforms anymore to just do self-preferencing, and with that comes kind of our regular auditing on the systemic risks. And we will look at all these things that you mentioned on mental health, addiction, to kind of the kind of going only for where the attraction is, because the algorithms in their black boxes are such that people are simply drawn into these echo chambers and staying there. That's what we are breaking up with, kind of putting transparency into the recommender system. That's why we have just created in Sevilla a European Center on Algorithmic Transparency. We really mean it. This is not only lip service based. This is really, a promise to, you all, the European, citizens, that we will watch them and we will kind of, show that immediately. And just to add on that, there are now hard legislative rules, because disinformation is complex if you don't want to end up in censorship. So it's probably not a black and white thing, but there are now hard rules on minor protection when it comes to profiling. There are hard rules on illegal content. There are hard rules on keeping your online marketplaces safe. So here we can go into finding these kind of companies, and we have the means and the tools to go after them and to find them up to very high numbers of their annual turnover. So I would really give us a little bit of benefit of the doubt that we have been able, again, in a rather pioneering way in Europe, with all the 27 member states, to come together on some quite important next steps to tidy up that Wild West in the kind of internet space.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Miller, you wanted to react on this debate, and also Mr. Kovacic.
Yes, I just wanted to say, well, I don't envy you for the challenge. And just some critical words also as a journalist about journalism, because if we look at that space, we always say, there should be, policy, regulation, is a solution for this. And yes, that's a key factor, making sure it's transparent. But we also have to rethink increasingly how do we do our work, because the people who are exploiting the technologies on the other side are not going to wait for us to catch up, and they're not going to wait for regulation to be enforced. And which is a great point. And so the other thing I wanted to stress here, and that is what's really worrying beyond the journalism, is the Twilight Zone of countries where you have where companies like Microsoft maybe or others who have these technologies are unsure whether they should collaborate with these governments, right? Is it safe to work with government X, right? Is it when that government, when civil liberties are not respected in that government? And we don't have a black and white situation there. Let's think about what if, say, Azerbaijan, Armenia, or goes to Microsoft, I want information that you have gathered through these systems about our citizens. So there's a lot of thought that still needs to get into how do we deal with that gray zone of countries that may use that information to stifle the public.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kovacic.
Thank you very much. I see that atmosphere is heating, and I would like to respond to your question, are we ready? The question is, who is us, who we are talking about. And I must say I'm a big fan of what the European Commission and European Parliament is doing. Really, thank you for that. But still, skepticism is coming from Slovakia, is still on the table. Let's say, question, are we ready? Deepfake is coming, and people, as far as Slovakia is concerned, not necessarily all countries of the European Union. I'm thinking about Sweden, where also Russian propaganda and fake news were trying to penetrate the country, and they, they didn't succeed at all. In Slovakia, dramatically. So people got lost in simple algorithms of social media, and suddenly you have deepfake coming. And in all countries that somehow understand that everything what is written is not as what you see is not what you get. Basically, all of us who are coming from former socialist, real socialist states, we understand radio Yerevan jokes, typical radio Yerevan. Is that true that Ivan Ivanov won a car in Leningrad? Well, the answer, in principle, it's true, but not Ivanovich Ivanov, but Denisovich Denisov. Not in Leningrad, but in Moscow. Not a car, but bicycle. And he didn't win, but it was stolen from him. You know, and this is basically what people got used to. That, you know, nothing is as it is written. So the conspiratory mentality is in place, and I believe that some countries, and it's of course our fault, clearly, are not ready. And let me just mention very clearly what we are talking about in Slovakia. The most pro-Russian country of the whole region. Not only pro-Russian, the most pro-Putin. You know, Putin was more popular in Slovakia before the war than in Russia itself. Extremely high level of distrust, both on horizontal and vertical levels. Very Eurosceptic country. Suddenly, the country that entered the European Union with the level of Euro-optimism which was unheard of. You know, Slovakia was on top 19 years ago. Suddenly, it's gone. You know, and we can measure whatever we want. European Union is not important for Slovakia, supported by a lot of people. Do you feel European? Not really. Possible referendum, 36% of people would vote in favor of leaving European Union, the lowest rate in European Parliament elections turnout, etc., etc. Believing in the world conspiracy, conspiracy of elites. 58% of Slovaks believe that there is some mysterious group of elites that is ruling the world. 52% believe that there are Jews ruling this world. And I can continue. You know, it's a mess. And in case of Slovakia, because countries differ, you know, in some countries Twitter is more important than others and more significant. In case of Slovakia, it's Facebook, and Facebook became so toxic in Slovakia that even former Prime Minister was desperate, asking people from Facebook to cancel some of the most toxic guys on internet. Very often Slovak MPs. You know, Facebook was not responding. Nobody was responding. Ministry of Foreign Affairs was trying to get some contact in Facebook. No response. So then 4 congressmen from US visited Slovakia, and Prime Minister of Slovakia asked them very politely, can you eventually try to contact Facebook? They are not responding. You know, this is embarrassing. And, you know, Mark Zuckerberg, which I believe in history will be evaluated as a criminal, you know, by historians in the future, simply doesn't care. No, I mean it. And I believe that historians will evaluate it this way. Simply was not responding at all. And then US congressmen, people outside of European Union, kindly asked Facebook to cancel this, the most toxic post on Facebook you can think of. Suddenly, it was done. You know, so of course, that's why I'm welcoming so much that European Parliament and European Commission is doing so much, because to rely on some US congressmen in such situations when country is being destroyed, literally, you know, destroyed, is useless. You know, it's embarrassing.
If I may turn more maybe to science with Mr. Shimko, would you? I cannot ask to this pessimistic tone, but would you tell us examples? What can we expect? I mean, we heard a lot about what has been happening in this regard, but what are the dark visions that can take place in the future? How can AI further hurt the election process in countries?
Haven't we heard enough?
We are expecting that. So what is the nightmare on steroids?
When it comes to generated content, because we already know that recommenders will like attain more and more ability to serve us the content that we emotionally react to. Okay, so this will be happening gradually, as it was happening like 10 years until now. And regarding generated content, the biggest nightmare is that we won't be able to detect that something is generated. That's like the biggest nightmare here. Right now, it's really a arms race, as I told, but who knows where that will end? Of course, we will have systems that will like purposefully watermark their outputs, but there may be systems that will be completely in the wild, sitting somewhere in country X with no rules, and on the darknet you would like you could like pay for requests there. No, that's like the nightmare. But if it happens and when.
What is the optimistic?
Okay. Yeah.
Can we put some optimistic note or tone to this debate? What can we do? What has to be done?
Okay. I will present an example. Okay. So we need to like really have a credible assessment tools on platform algorithm behavior. So when we are talking about the algorithm serving us like content that is appealing to us, okay, we can show that on individual examples, but how do we measure it like quantitatively? How do we actually prove at the court, for example, Facebook has been serving too much disinformative content or too like emotionally exciting content to users, contrary to the code of practice that you signed to. How do we prove that? The only way I see now is that we deploy a black box auditing. Essentially, you create bots that act as users. They stimulate the platform and receive the real behavior from it. This is extremely difficult to do on scale with all the concept shifts, new content, etc. Platforms can easily detect this large-scale operations and then can shut down your bots. It's not even like compliant with their terms of use, and yeah, this is like the biggest obstacle, which I'm very curious whether implementation of DSA will help, and that's perhaps the main concern you have.
Absolutely. So if I may add one negative, I would say is the
You need to speak up. I'm sorry. You need to speak up.
Okay.
So,
two things. Let me follow up on Mr. Shenko's remark on Facebook and Facebook basically that is doing nothing but promoting radicalization of the society, and there's no way to ask him for or to press him for responsibility, even under the European legislation. So there are two more hostile, much more hostile online social networks, which are being used in Slovakia and also in the Czech Republic, because those information spaces are very well connected, and that is a Russian Telegram and that is a Russian Contact. And you can hardly imagine what the people are who are like users of those platforms, what they are exposed to. You can hardly imagine it. It's like Goebbels' propaganda, like by camp in the hyper-connected world. So I think it's beyond imagination of people who don't see it in their real lives. So this is the first remark to this topic. But let me come up with something positive. And that is proposal of how to solve the current approach that we will have to prove that platforms are doing something wrong is the wrong one, because there will still be an advance. The only way, in my opinion, is to regulate the business model, that online platforms will become responsible for the content that is being presented on those platforms. And all of us know that at the beginning of internet, when there was like hope that internet will support democratization of the entire society, they got the immunity. So they are not responsible at all And nowadays, and since then, they have become by far the most dominant media platforms, and they are not regulated by media laws. So this is completely like insane. And if we change that paradigm, that they are responsible for what they are proposing. And just to give you an example, people spend on like reading articles on online news articles like minutes, like 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes in average. People spend 1, 2, 3, 4 hours in average on social media. So this is the difference, and this is being completely ignored. So and in case we cancel this immunity for them and provide them with like a, let's say, 2 years grace period, so they can adopt their system and create measures, technical measures, because they have all the capabilities on their side not to amplify this harmful content, then it will be solved, because they will be scared to death to be exposed to lawsuits all over the world. And you may remember that one of the biggest American disinformator, I think his name was Davis, he got $1 billion fine by the U.S. court for for one single disinformation. So just imagine what fines would be exposed to the online platforms, and they will do everything they can to change the situation, and this will be solved.
Just a short comment, because I think we need time for a question, because the topic is so broad that I think it will be the best if you will have the chance to pose some questions. And also after that, we will have another briefing with Madame Nicolai, which will be off the record, which I understand. Is that correct? So please.
Just two other ideas to throw in. First, force them to extreme interoperability between each other and portability of user accounts and data, just like with the mobile operators. And the second, consider breaking them up, like to smaller companies.
So I will start the question, the first questions of that. So are there any? Please raise your hands if you are any. Yes, please.
Thank you. I would like
please speak up so that we can do for the streaming as well. Speak up, please.
All right. Thank you for an occasional question. I would like to move.
I'm very sorry. Could you please tell us your name and
Jan Engera, Society of Ignorance of the So my question will be a bit different kind. I mean, back to the AI, questioning jobs like translators and so on. How do you see?
I'm not sure if I heard it because of the trends.
Oh, I think how the AI will affect translating jobs.
Yes,
is that
mostly
correct? Yeah.
around jobs.
Well, I can maybe start. I think it's inevitable that every evolution, technologically driven, as we have seen in the past, has an impact on the labor market and has an impact on society. That's why I really find it extremely important to look at how we go also as a European Union about the digital transition in general. That's what, again, with the member states, with the parliament, we have given ourselves clear target where we want to be in terms of 2030 by, we have created this digital decade kind of idea. But it's a very holistic approach that includes a lot of, not leaving anybody behind and really kind of helping those who will have an impact in their sectors. Because, there will always have to be a corrective measure because the systems are not perfect. But we saw that in earlier phases of, industrial evolution, technological evolutions. We have to carry the society with us. So the worst that could happen is that we, use this and ignore this and then create the digital divides that already exist here and there. And we deepen them further because that could kind of create another kind of rift in society. So I think we are conscious of that. And that's why when we look at digital transition, media literacy, to get the society ready for it, so that they can actually, in a curious but also responsible way and savvy way, navigate through the digital kind of ecosystem on the one hand, but also upskilling, reskilling people who will have to adapt in their labor kind of, active labor market life to changes in their respective sectors is a key role for us as policymakers and as partners in this kind of transition that we want to form, but so that it serves everybody in the society.
Can I follow up? So what should a journalist do? How should a journalist get ready for that? Because it's a special kind of job that we distribute the information. So how should us journalists prepare for the evolution? So if you have advice, are there any journalists in the room? I saw that there no.
There is a Czech journalist hiding over there. I can see him.
So what do the journalists do? Because they have more kind of influence on distributing information. So what should we do to face the threat of the growing impact of AI?
If I may, at this moment, for instance, ChatGPT is very good for journalists. It really can help and enable their work and make it more easy. I would say that it helps, for instance, remove like a lot of mundane tasks when, for instance, you're trying to edit your own text or add some more content to it. Also, what really helps ChatGPT with is that, for instance, if you are a journalist who is like engaging in a new topic that you have no experience with, it's the technology itself that can help you get familiar with at least the basics of that particular topic. So, for instance, you were writing or preparing an article regarding some space program, you never worked on that, but yet with artificial intelligence, you have a good shot at getting familiar with the complex topic easier. And also what really can be beneficial in the near future is, for instance, that even the fact-checking or debunking can be actually enabled and made easier with the use of current programs. And lately I've been exploring this very handy AI tool for journalists that actually helps you, as you are writing an article, as you are making statements, it is fact-checking what you write and comparing it to already existing pieces of text that are present online, and it can help you avoid any kind of mistake or misinformation in your own production of information as you are making it. So, and this is just the beginning. This is just 6 months of technology that is presented to general public. So there is a lot of way to improve the work of journalism, and I think it also can lead to maybe increase of trust in our societies, because with good and transparent communication, we can actually inform the public that these tools at this current moment can really help journalists do the job better and actually build up the trust that has been lost due to the manipulation by professional manipulators who are out there and still active. So I don't want to sound naive, but yes, there is still some silver lining to all this.
Maybe Martin L, the Czech journalist from Prague, would like to add?
Martin L from Czech Economic Daily. I don't use ChatGPT because of the experience of my colleagues, artificial intelligence inventing facts. But there is bits into the story, so I don't do that. So basically, I have to work with the facts.
Are you using the Pro version?
I don't use it. I was using a lot of programs for transcribing and translating. And it's also useless because it doesn't work 100% in languages I work with. I work more or less in 5 languages. So for me, it's little help, but not so much so far. So I'm not afraid of my job so far, because I'm also working with the facts which nobody else than me knows, for example, about. So I don't know what I like it. So my artificial intelligence, I will not put it into the sphere that I can control it. So basically, this is it. My question for our participants, speaking about elections, social networks, and artificial intelligence, if you put it together, to what extent you will see, or are already seeing in the Slovak campaign, products of artificial intelligence influencing the voters, and to what extent this will be studied as the first artificial intelligence influence democratic elections in our region?
And maybe can I add a question? How do you see the elections in the United States in the next year to be in terms of competitiveness of this issue or this challenge? Thank you.
If I may, in regards of Slovakia, the one thing we know is that the people who are really the most successful in manipulating the public are in some way really old-fashioned. So they didn't really jump on the bus using AI. So they are still they are doing the business as usual. They are just producing content on the platforms where they are like well known. They have a lot of followers, and they don't really have to create some deep fakes or whatever. They just misinterpret something out of context, or they just use some blatant lie, or just extreme language, and they slowly but surely change the society to a very polarized society where it's easy for them to attract the attention of these, I would say, very angry people who have been in this position due to waves of artificial cognitive crisis that Slovakia is actually for years flooding in. And AI is not responsible for the crisis we have in Slovakia right now. And I'm not expecting that that current generation of manipulators we have in Slovakia are gonna use AI in any near time. So it won't be happening. Maybe after the elections, once the people who will be maybe in power, the next generation will be doing that, and it will be far more problematic than it is right now. But I think the status quo in terms of how the manipulation is being produced and disseminated, it will remain at least for the period till September this year when the election will be happening. Regarding US, I don't wanna be producing some content out of crystal ball, so I would skip that question and someone else can pick it up.
Only a joke. But at some point, Eric Kaliňák will install the chatbot, and yeah, it can be tomorrow. It's like a local next generation, like a guy that is 24 or something, very young,
And he'll do some workshops for the older guys too.
Yeah.
So, if I may, would like make some sort of a generalization of your question. I think, and with all respect, it was, I think, put wrongly, because we think, or there's like assumption that people vote according to what is being told in the election campaign, but this is not that one. This is not the case. Of course, it's partially the case, but the way how the society is being radicalized is during the years. It's a steady, long-term process. So the frog is being boiled, and is being boiled by our enemies, like the Russian propaganda and the psychological operations, and this is being amplified, let's say 10 times more. The impact of those operations are amplified by the business model, by the algorithms of the online social media, like Facebook, like YouTube, like TikTok, and more by Kontakte and Telegram.
One last question, or two last questions, so please.
Hi, Katerina from the Slovak Prime Minister's office. I just actually wanted to do a follow-up on what Mr. Vašička was saying about the discussions between like Slovak Prime Minister and, let's say, Meta and etc. So, although the truth is not about like Slovakia being too small and irrelevant, the problem is that if Germany is discussing something with Google, it is still irrelevant. That's why it's so important that we have this discussion on EU level. And I wanted to actually just acknowledge your Vice President of the European Commission as your approach for this work. She's been really discussing a lot of things with Google and Meta and trying to discuss ways how to make sure that disinformation is actually being defeated from Facebook. But this is not, it's not possible to do it individually. So individual countries don't have enough power to put pressure on them. And it's really about the global, or at least EU approach. So let's just follow up our explanation.
Very much. Last question, please.
Hello, my name is Satya Barik. I'm a digital content creator, people call it influencer. But the reason why I'm here, I'm also doing a video course for young people for schools about artificial intelligence. And I would like to ask, I have many questions, but probably I will boil down to two. the first thing is, what about the young people? Because we seem like it's been only 6 months, and already there are studies that the job market will be disrupted like hugely. It's only been 6 months, and these language models like GPT-4 are already are capable using tools. So if it generates some random facts which is false, it can fact check itself. Like, what about the young people that are growing up, especially maybe in our country? Because I've heard from our government like 5 times about artificial intelligence, and that's all. Our school system is like maybe the 20th century is at the best. It's preparing the children for the world of 20th century. We are living in 21st century. What about these people? There are climate changes that will impact the whole world, migration and everything. And I feel like the young people are just not taking into consideration that much. The demographic crisis also, that's like also another big factor. And I'm sorry for, I just want to give 2 suggestions about the misinformations or the deepfakes, because I was studying this topic a lot, and from what I came up with, it's like you have to force the big companies to watermark it. Like, the bots will be inefficient because other people will create other bots that will come up with a solution to go around the bots, and it will be like this the never-ending race. And the other thing is like to really criminalize, sorry for that word, like the generation of like people or something, like the fake generating of people, for example. Like we criminalize like money printing, for example.
And do you have a question, or?
No, it's like maybe just a suggestion to maybe enforce law of some kind.
Is there a reaction either on the legislation or thank you very much, or how to take in the young generation and how to prepare it for this era of AI? Yes, please.
I can perhaps take it just from the job market, from the labor market. Anyone who is hiring must have noticed over the last few months how great cover letters have become. Just as an example. And it's just, there is a huge opportunity to make industries that have been just limited to a certain social group or to a certain sector of society, like journalism has that problem, to make them more inclusive if we get this right. The other thing is also, just to point on how journalism will change. If we get this right, a lot of people in journalism are working in repetitive tasks, are doing stuff that can be automated now in this change. And there's an opportunity for us to free up these resources to do a better job at talking to people, to reporting, to telling stories and bringing people in. One of the challenges that I'm worried about is as we work, as these generative data sets fill up with content, how do we make sure that they are diverse, that we're not kind of replicating on a generative level a certain superstructure that already exists, and don't perpetuate that, but really make sure that it is diverse and equitable. So, and use it really to give people an opportunity, to succeed in their careers.
Thank you very much. I think at this point we will go off the record. We will stop streaming and we can elaborate more. And maybe Madam Nikolai would like to add more points if it is on the record as part of the session. Is okay? Yeah.
I mean, this is rather an offer to reply to questions in a different way, but happy to kick off and also to pick up what you just said. I think, first of all, I think the watermarking will come into the AI Act legislation.